edition here on the Barn Burner Network and ZINGOTV channel 250. Remember, please to download the apps of OSG, Barn Burner, and ZINGOTV on their respective iOS and Android stores on all your devices. Remember that ZINGOTV can also be found on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Remember as well, please, that all the applications that we have are totally free. Gives you no reason why not to download them and enjoy them. Once you download them, once you see our programming, please leave us a comment and a rating. We always like to know what you guys want to see, what you guys, if the applications are working correctly, so that you can get enjoyment out of them. So tonight, as you can see, my co-host, Lloyd Mosby, is not on camera today because he is going through the California pandemic problems down there, as well as the forest fires in this area of Sacramento. So he is really stuck. But I have a great show for you tonight. First of all, let me introduce the man on camera with a wonderful Christmas hat. And he is Mr. Scott Churchson, probably one of New York's best and New Jersey's best sports analysts.
Thank you.
As well as a stunt professional and a voiceover specialist. You will probably, if you are in the New York tri-state area, you will be seeing him on every sports screen that has to do with the New Jersey Devils. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you, sir. You know, heck of a build-up here. First of all, I'm replacing Lloyd Mosby today, so I have that hurdle to handle. Then I've got the build-up now of everything, and thank you again for that. I'm really grateful. But that's going to put a lot of pressure on me to be able to make sure that I can hold up to it here, because you know what? The bar is set pretty high. So, but yeah, thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
As well, ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting the arrival of a good friend of mine, a colleague for many years in the broadcasting area and in this media area, Mr. H.E.R. He is probably Canada's most notable podcaster in the sports arena, from the Jays Journal to the Maple Leafs Sounds and the Raptors Roar.
Mm-hmm.
And he has now verged into a new arena, into the area of analyzing the political scene and cultural atmospheres. As well, he is an innovator in artificial intelligence technologies. So you will get a kick out of him. We are going to be talking about diverse topics in this show, aside from what we used to do with Lloyd. So to start with, Scott, let's go into what's been happening in sport, because it's crazy, man. It's just crazy.
There's a ton of stuff right now. I mean, the big announcement, of course, that I want to really talk about, and from baseball standpoint, is the heavy discussion and what basically with as far as like the seven inning double headers, universal DH. Universal DH is, shall we say, a contested topic. There's a lot of divisiveness on that. Also talk about a lot of the implementing changes that have actually been occurring in Major League Baseball, most of which I think have been good. I like most of the decisions that have been made there. I think they're going to be a big part of the future going forward. But a lot of people, a lot of fans are not happy with the change that's involved. And it's funny, a lot of managers were not initially happy with the changes either, but now they're like, we love them.
I mean, look, the universal, I understand why they want to put universal DH.
Mm-hmm.
It's more effective for both leagues, so that there is no confusion there when we go to the World Series. But at the end of the day, what made baseball dynamic, especially the National League, was that strategy that you could switch pitchers for outfielders, And it made it really interesting because managers really had to have a sense and been following the game.
Hmm.
Just have the tendency that yes, they are directing the game, but they are not following the game. You don't know what's coming down.
Yeah, I know. My issue with that is the fact that when it comes down to it, a lot of pitchers just frankly are just not good hitters. You know, you get the anomaly out there. I mean, I'm looking at the 2019 season, for example. Now, Shohei Ohtani, leaving that out of there. The best hitter in 2019 as a pitcher was Michael Lorenzen, and his career batting average is only 247. You know, Zach Greinke is 219. So you're looking at these guys, you know, even number five, Vivardi Geraldo, he's barely above the Mendoza line at 201. These guys here have, frankly, very mediocre batting averages for pitchers, which, okay, you know, frankly, mediocre batting averages as a hitter. As a pitcher, fine. But as a hitter, honestly, these are low numbers. These are weak numbers. And personally, I think it takes away from the game. I'm one of those few people out there that is in favor of the universal DH from the standpoint that it adds a little bit of an offensive punch instead of that so-called automatic out with the number 9 spot. I've never been a fan of that. I've never been huge on that. You know, pitchers by and large, it's more of a comedic value watching them swing than anything else. You know, okay, they go up there, runners on base, you know they're going to bunt. There is no real strategy there. They get a hit. It's like, oh, wow, they got a hit. You know, and I think personally it takes away from a sport that needs a little bit more energy and vibrancy to it. So I admit I'm in the minority on this. I admit that I get hate for this, but I am actually in favor of the universal DH.
Now, let's bring another rule that changed this past season during COVID, and that's the wonderful rule of if you go to extra innings, you start in space. And come on, doesn't make sense. I mean, you are giving the pitcher that comes in relief in the 10th inning a hell of a task.
Mm-hmm.
You're already putting him in a downward spiral. He has a man at second, and no one has hit yet.
Well, I think the idea in this case here is they're trying to do away with the 15, 16, 17 inning game in this case and make it a shorter game in the long run. Baseball has been trying for a lot of years now to try and shorten the length of games, which I am, frankly, never used to be in favor of this, but now I'm starting to turn in that direction. The runner on second does not count, I don't believe, towards the ERA of the pitcher. It's considered a team run, however. But they can still get credit for the loss, sure, but it doesn't count towards their individual statistics by my recollection. But the idea is to be able to speed up the game a little bit, add a little, like I said, add a little bit of drama. I think what baseball is really trying to do is they're trying to move in the direction of adding drama to a sport that, frankly, is starting to lose it. You know, you're seeing these other sports. I mean, right now, baseball and basketball, I think, are the two most popular sports in the US, followed by baseball. You go back 20, 30 years, baseball was number one. And then all of a sudden, people, I think, as they become faster paced and have shorter attention spans, I think technology has a lot to do with that. It's causing people to not be able to sit as well to watch things like baseball. You saw what happened with the World Series. There were games in the middle of a work week that would start at 8 o'clock at night on the Eastern time zone and not finish a 9 inning game until after midnight. Fine on the West Coast. They're done by 9:30 at night. They can go to bed fine. But for anybody on the East Coast that has to work the next day, this is a struggle. This is a challenge here. And I think what baseball is trying to do is they're trying to figure out ways to keep the game from going 4, 5, even 6 hours and keep people's attention span a little bit better.
I can understand that, but it takes away from the game. The reality of what baseball was and the reality of what it you cannot, with everything that has changed and how the game has evolved, you don't have a game because you don't have a starting pitcher that is predominant anymore. You basically you can start with whoever you want and just throw them in there.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the game has changed and that started when they changed the wonderful rule at home plate of no contact.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hold on, why don't you just tell the runner you're safe? because if you the steal of home, that was the ultimate play
Yep.
teams used to play. And to me, that made it exciting. It made it, the pitcher didn't know if they were going to be a steal of home at
Mhm.
the point in the game.
And there is a lot of drama to that. I know. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think the automatic intentional pass, as opposed to the four pitches, it takes away from little things like seeing a guy take a swing at the bat, swing at the ball anyway, even though it's so far out of the strike zone as an intentional walk. But it does have to require certain sacrifices like that. But again, I'm still more or less okay with it in the interest of trying to streamline the game and make it a little more compact. The three batter reliever rule that's there is also being done for that specific reason. So you don't have a guy come in and throw one, to one batter and then be done for the night. You force him to have to pitch to a minimum of three batters, which forces the fact that you can't be able to actually switch him out as much. Again, it's an idea to try and streamline things. Now, the only new rule change that I'm not fond of, and I knew it was going to be here to stay when they proposed it last year, is the new expanded playoff system. I'm not big on that. I fought a little bit with the two wild card setup, but I came to be okay with it because I like the idea of a winner take all, move on. Now that you got three, now that you're watering this down a little bit more to four. I mean, all these different teams. I feel it's watering down the wild card itself, and I'd like to see something done where it actually tightens it up a little bit, where a team that is not under 500. We had two. Now, granted, it was COVID, but there were two teams under 500 that made the playoffs last year. This is what I'm not fond of personally. You got to be able to at least have something over 500. Previously, the only time that a team even came close to 500 was the 73 Mets, who had, I believe, a 502 or 504 win percentage. They had two teams this year that basically got into the playoffs in a brand new system with a losing record. That's NBA East. That's NFC East in this case. Where you have getting into the losing record. I'm not crazy about that. I think it's a little bit weak. I think it waters down the product a little bit. But I've also respected the fact that it's a money thing and it's going to be here to stay no matter how much I may gripe about it.
One of the things that I am concerned with, because we are talking that the ownership is talking about how many games they are going to play this season and this and that. They are debating on rules. They are debating on this. They forgot one little factor. They have a CBA that hasn't been negotiated yet.
Yeah.
Which might put a damper on the whole season if they don't, like, they went to the winter meetings, didn't do anything.
I know.
So how do they expect to start a season if you don't have a collective bargaining agreement where you have disclosed that you got $1.5 billion TV contract that you don't want to share with the players?
Yeah, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, excuse me. Well, that's part of the reason why. That's another reason why I think baseball will not be starting until May next year. I've been hearing this one a lot. So it'll be a shortened season starting then, which is obviously still sooner than it was this past year. But that's part of it too, to try and be able to hammer out some of the contract details in that regard. Also try and figure out how they're going to be handling certain things with regards to travel. In that space, I think I love what the NHL has done with this. Keeping it all within division. I think it's the best you can do in that kind of circumstance. So I would not be the least bit surprised if you see something similar to that again for Major League Baseball this year, where you see an East, a Central, and a West. And in this case, it doesn't matter what. You could see the Phillies and the Mets going up against the Yankees on a regular basis, or Toronto playing out of Buffalo again. But you make the best of the situation as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to say the least. How it's panning out. Mr. Shapiro, welcome to Spanglish Sports World. Finally.
What a prima donna, and I'm late too.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that way, dude. I'm sorry.
I'll tell you, no. I deserve scorn here. I should have done this a long time ago. It's good to be here. Good to be. Look at you guys. I should have come prepared with some kind of Christmas memorabilia or something. I feel like this is my survivalist Christmas, attire that I'm wearing here. And look at you at the background, Ed. What are you doing there? Look at you. You're like floating in some like giant barn burner kaleidoscope cloud, man. It's fantastic. Look at you. How long have you been using this
Well,
effect?
I've been using it for a while now.
Holy cow, man. It's a little trippy. I'm not going to
Well,
lie.
I can show you. Actually, let me enlighten you and show you our setup in our studios, because we have studios also.
Oh my
These
goodness.
are our studios.
This is so interactive. I feel like I'm being pulled into like some kind of virtual reality Eduardo Hariri, super adventure. No, that's great, man. That looks really nice, by the way. Looks like you put a lot of time and money.
So you know those studios because you have been to those studios before.
I have. I'm glad I'm not around them now, to be honest with you. Because
So these are the old MTV studios at the Masonic Temple.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy cow! Look at that. That's fantastic. I don't know what I'd do with so many screens in the background. I'd lose my mind.
And he knows what's on each and every one of them. If I tell him to go to the one in the top right section there, he'll be able to tell you right off the bat which one is that is. Eduardo, go. Which one is it? Top right corner, second one in.
Top right corner, second one in. That was a show on CP24 from last year that we were trying to broadcast.
You know what? I didn't think he'd be able to do that. I mean, he could be lying, but you know what? It sounds
so
good.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Except I'm wondering, was it in the morning or was it in the evening, Eduardo? Like, come on.
Evening.
Yeah. What was the weather that day?
I was just kidding, and you still answered it. Man, good for you guys. Holy hell.
So,
Holy balls, man, fantastic. So what do you want to do, Eduardo? What can I do to help? Like, what do you want to do? Because you know how.
So, Mr. Shapiro, I gave you an introduction that you didn't hear when we entered the show. I am that introduction because
you're not going to use Shapiro, are you? That kind of pronunciation, I hope.
No, Shapiro.
Of course you will. There you go. Quick. I want to see how much you know.
I don't want to associate you with the evil face in the Toronto Blue Jays.
Oh. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be associated with Mark Shapiro either. Especially when he takes my name and butchers it. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Look, that's not unusual. There are other people who are extremely influential and wealthy who decided to play with fast and loose with their surname. Like, what's his name out in the West there? Daryl Cates. It's actually Katz. That's the name. It's a very popular Jewish last name, Katz, right? You've heard it before, but for him, it's Cates. And, it's the prerogative that if you've got the money and the power, you can call yourself whatever the hell you want.
Not with my last name, you can't.
What and your last name?
Churchson. Yeah, son of a church.
Son of a church.
Yeah. That's all
but you know what though? But that's such a great surname because it evokes like a real history. Like there's a historic element. How did you have ancestors who were sons of the church? What did they do to earn that name?
See, in this case,
I answer that question. But
the last name is only like 75 years old, believe it or not. It used to be Kramzovich until the Cold War. And then my grandfather changed the family name and cut out like 400 years of history just to be able to protect his son against the Cold War relations. My father, in this case.
That's a very cool origin.
So it used to be Kramzovich. Kramzovich translates to son of a church. Ergo, Churchson. There we go.
And Ed, I don't know if you know this, but Shapiro originally is a German name. There's a city out there. There's a city out there. The original name was Spion, like a spy, which is a Slavic equivalent to spy in a lot of languages. And it, like anything else with humanity, it evolved, names, symbols, interpretations evolve. And that's why you've got to laugh when somebody meets you and says, "Oh, Shapiro, I thought you were Italian." And then at that point, you're like, why even bother with history? Why not make your own history, So when you say Churchson, I mean, there are people who jump to a lot of conclusions about how you got your name. Be thankful it's original. Churchson's actually, it is. That's a very original name now.
Oh, yeah. I'm literally the only Scott Churchson in the country. So you Google me, you find me. It's real easy.
You see, and you guys booked the second most popular Ari Shapiro in North America. So, I mean, at least I'm competing with the name.
I was curious about that in this case here.
Don't be too curious, but hit me. What are you curious about?
I was going to say, which Ari Shapiro are we dealing with here?
Well, listen, my NPR counterpart brings it. He's really successful, but his approach to the news is less about sports and more about like politics and popular culture. Although, as you know, Ed, I'm branching out there just simply because everything bleeds into one thing or another, right? Sports, in particular, in the last year, as you know, spearheading this network and doing the great things you're doing. sports has become a reflection of politics and also an inspiration to politics. There are a lot of progressive things that have happened in different leagues that we can thank, in many cases, inspired leadership. Of course, there are other examples of really woeful, you know, heel dragging bullshit that we've had to put up with. By the way, what's the censor rating on your show, and how much latitude do I have in the crass department?
I think no FCC, basically no breaking FCC rules.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But you said spit, so I didn't hear it. I was cleaning my ear. I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, exactly. I said bullpucky, as they call
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Poo.
You know.
Yeah. So
Um,
so let me again introduce you to our esteemed audience all over North America and the world. As you can see in the lowest part of my screen, below me is Mr. Ari Shapiro, one of Canada's foremost authorities in sport, one of Canada's greatest podcasters. Started with a small show called Jay's Journal and expanded into every single sport that could be imaginable under the face of the earth, and now has expanded with Whiskey and Cream, a new podcast focusing on everyday society's needs.
After an
Here he is.
introduction like that, I'm not sure what I can possibly follow it up with. I do
I
like.
feel like I said that 20 minutes ago, actually. When
Well, you know, and thanks for that intro. And I like the fact that you still mentioned Shapiro. I can't tell whether that was a double entendre or you just forgot, but these days I really don't care. Shapiro or Shapiro, it's a pleasure to get this kind of appreciation and mutual admiration too, because I love what you guys do, and I love that we could find some time to talk about whatever you wanted to talk under the sun, especially with these cool effects behind you, Eduardo. I can't get over the special effects. It's really trippy in all the best possible ways.
So we were, when you, as you came into the conversation, we were talking about the rule changes that have transpired in the game of baseball as a whole. The universal DH, the no contact at home, the second base runner after in the extra innings, stuff like that. That, in my opinion, are changes that are too radical for a game that was emblematic of what America stands for and what Canada stood for, because after all, the game of baseball was created here. It was it was the game of basketball. So, I don't know what your opinion is on that. Sorry.
Well, let's use the word that I think really only matters, which is radical, right? I mean, changes. You have to modernize any game that's been around as long as baseball. You have to find a way to bring the game to another generation without damaging the legacy that you may have created for the previous generation. And of course, that's a fickle thing, isn't it? Because the previous generation's legacy, I guess my generation's legacy, because I'm a Gen Xer. I relate to people who were born, as Scott puts up his hand there, people who were born at a time when they remember Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and the Blue Jays winning back-to-back World Series championships. But man, oh man, those were fairy tale years in comparison to the reality of where baseball is today. And specifically, as you said, Ed, it's too much radicalism. It's what happens when a league is only concerned with profit as its number one priority. And I'm not going to get into one of my rants, as you know, because I'm highly critical of Rob Manfred in a way that it may seem like I'm taking it on personally, but I grew up with the sport. You know, baseball was my my dream catcher for being inspired to go out and have the confidence to do things in life. And whenever you play baseball, it only seemed to infuse you with that sense of being part of something that is to be respected. You know, a time-honored national pastime where you would evoke memories of the greats, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Satchel Paige, and you just go through the eras, because first and foremost, I'm a baseball historian. I love the game, and I can challenge anyone at Baseball Jeopardy, which is a strange talent to have, I know. But one that I'm proud of because I grew up in that era. But at least they took, by our standards, right, baby steps. They didn't ever have a gateway where they just decided to completely make these types of sweeping changes. And some of them, I'll tell you right now, I think are a long time coming, and I agree with, like the universal DH. It never made sense to me, even though I loved it, which we can discuss later why I did, but it didn't make sense to have one league that basically philosophically approached the game differently than the other because of that one spot that the pitcher would hit 143, I think, on average in a season, as opposed to, your best hitter on the team used to be your designated hitter. If you had Edgar Martinez, you were going to cause damage with him in that ninth slot. But this was just too much. And already it had become controversial with the no contact rules, right? I mean, those took a long time for us to adjust, that a runner would actually have to abide by a certain parameter before smashing into a catcher on a close play or into any base. And we saw why that had to happen. And Jose Bautista here locally made us really appreciate why that needed to happen, because it was getting ridiculous. But at home plate, it's reached a point now where, in adjusting to these new rules, they've kind of grabbed a whole generation kicking and screaming from the past and saying, you will love this and you will enjoy it. And I think most people in my age would agree that it's too much too soon and it hurts the game. And it's the reason why they still make more profits than ever, but less people are coming year in, year out. So something's not kosher in the land of baseball.
It could be somewhat of a panic move also, because you're seeing ratings dropping. I'm looking at the ratings right now. All 6 of the games, the World Series games that they had in 2020, Dodgers and the Rays, despite the LA market, all 6 of those games were the lowest rated games that they ever had in Major League history since they started actually studying the ratings themselves. So the very fact, I'm looking at game 1. Game 1 was 13.9 million when it was Washington versus Houston. This time around, 9.7. That is a 4 million viewer drop, and probably about 33% drop from game 1 to game 1 year later. You're looking at baseball panicking because they're realizing, I think, that other sports are taking hold. Other distractions are taking hold. All the streaming services that are out there. Mobile gaming is a $500 billion industry. So people have things that they'd rather do than sit there for 4 hours and watch baseball. So I think they're doing these kind of changes to try and get people more interested, to try and bring in the younger audience, who frankly have so many options to deal with, that baseball is 1 of 100 versus say 1 of 10.
But I'll point out something to you, Scott, that and here is the other change in the game that I feel that it has become it has become a panic for the players, not so much for the audience. And is that the game has become an analytical structure game, not a game of having fun any longer.
It's all numbers. Yeah, you're right. It is a lot of analytics.
If you don't hit this number, if you don't hit the OPS, or you don't hit in certain factors, then you are no longer wanted or needed in a team. And that's why there are so many free agents still out in the market without jobs, because those analytical numbers don't give the team a reason why to hire them. Look at the pitchers that are still sitting on the docket, and they are not bad pitchers. Mm-hmm. They are exceptional people that have gone through all the levels, from rookie ball through to the majors, that have put in the time to reach this level. And now, because of numbers, they are being taken for granted.
Well, I think it's always been a numbers game, even back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But yes, you're right. You look at every single swing, and then you're seeing, launch angle, bat, velocity off the bat, percentage of being a hit versus a catch. You're seeing how players hit the ball to the different sides. There's so much more statistical aspect of it that it's like Moneyball 10.0 instead of just Moneyball itself. It's like it's evolved to like, version 8, 9, and 10 now. So yeah, I do think that has a lot to do with it, where it is so analytical that honestly, you can't spell analytics without anal. And I think that's part of the problem here. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think the FCC is going to have something to say about this show,
I think
after that last point.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you, baseball, speaking of anal, baseball used to be very anal retentive when it came to making these changes. And to your point, Ed, you're absolutely right. A game has to evolve, but not to this reality where the analytics drives it so that it's completely shifted the way that players are treated by teams, by ownership groups. And what I mean by that is you're talking about a sport that was never about player relations to begin with, right? I mean, baseball's had a horrific history with the way it's treated its players, which is why it took until the late 60s, early 70s for free agency to finally give them some dignity back. And that's why they took as much as they could whenever they've had a chance to take that. And even though Tony Clark has absolutely botched it with his piss poor leadership, it doesn't mean that baseball has the right to keep changing their game, to your point, Scott, so that these data analytics basically justify the culture.
Mhm.
Like it's almost like, yeah, Moneyball times 10, but Moneyball was a shock to the system. Why? Because Moneyball put a lot of players out of work
Mhm.
that normally would have been regarded as being, as you mentioned, Ed, on the pine, available off the bench, arms that easily could qualify to be major league pitchers, but because of a certain data analytic or a certain statistic that's revealed, they're obviously ignored. And of course, with hitters, we know it's all about OBP. If your on base percentage isn't where it should be, you're not a major league player. But at the same time, so many teams value young players who can't even demonstrate how to take a walk, but at least they're cheap, right? You don't want to guarantee somebody a $10 million contract who's a heavy hitter and can give you 30 to 40 home runs if he's also going to strike out 150 to 200 times and not take a walk. At least if you can show he's getting on base, then you justify the war. But if you can't justify the wins above replacement, and you look back in history, especially with the speed game, right? Because when it came to base stealers that we grew up with, like the Vince Colemans and the Ricky Hendersons of the world, they would be horribly devalued by today's terms. I mean, especially Coleman, right? Because Coleman had a problem sometimes just taking a walk himself. But if he got on base, he'd steal you 130 bases a year. Is that valuable? Depending on what analytics you're paying attention to. For me, as a baseball fan, watching the game, it's priceless because I miss that era where a speedster could get on base. And then not only are you worried about him swiping the bases on you, but he's rattling your pitcher's cage. You know what I mean? He's creating that doubt. And then suddenly anything can happen. He can try to pick him off and overthrow, or he can balk or something like that. We've eliminated that intrigue. Why? Because everything is station to station. Swing as hard as you can and hit a home run or
Sports
take a
Center needs the
walk.
highlights.
So
Yeah.
with this, I'm going to open another topic that you are going to love, because now we are going to go into controversy with Hall of Fame eligibility based on stats, because that's what it's getting to. They, you can, if you were to take every single Hall of Famer right now that sits on the Hall of Fame, none of with the current stats, they would ever be in the Hall of Fame, because it was a different game altogether that it was played.
Well, the Hall
Uh,
of don't you agree, Ed, though, that the Hall of Fame, up until recently, because it became so political, right? I mean, Harold Baines, really? I mean, that's the
People had a
baseball
problem with Edgar
equivalent.
Martinez too.
Well, I hate to say this because it sounds overly dramatic, but it's like the political equivalent. Donald Trump is pardoning people he shouldn't be. The Baseball Hall of Fame knew they shouldn't have really brought Harold Baines in, but there were a lot of reasons beyond the statistical or even baseball related reasons. Sometimes you just have good buddies, who get you into the Hall of Fame quicker, like Pat Quinn getting Matt Sundin into the Hall of Fame before Brendan Shanahan. That shouldn't have happened. How the hell did Matt Sundin get to the Hall of Fame without any Stanley Cups, whereas Shanahan made a career out of them? So in the case of, I look at the Hall of Fame today and I say to myself, man, they're kind of in trouble because that class that's opened up is the steroid class, right? The
now,
class that kind of ruined the game for me personally for a very long time and for a lot of people in the 90s. Are you
but
going to tell me that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Because that's the million dollar question.
that's exactly a point that I wanted to make. Now, let's analyze the players that are not in the hall. Rafael Palmeiro, Barry Bonds, uh, Sosa, Maguire.
You know why those guys, you know what those guys share in common? All four of those guys, I would argue, share a lack of humility.
Mm.
That's what's kept them out of the Hall of Fame. Because I agree with you. Rafael Palmeiro, I worshiped for the longest time because nobody could make contact at the plate like him. I mean, he would just go out of his way to fight off pitches in the old school way, like Julio Franco used to do, right? Like his plate range was so wide. Exactly, he could pretty much. Well, you know, it reminds me of Vlad Guerrero Sr., right? When he would commit to a pitch that he knew was 20 feet out of the strike zone, he'd still foul it off. So even though you were angry that he swung way outside the strike zone, you'd say to yourself, "God bless you that you have the ability to still hang in there on a two-strike pitch." And I look at him and I say, man, the Hall of Fame isn't just about numbers. You're right. It's about honoring a culture that sets an example for the generation that it's in. And they're not always going to get it right because Ty Cobb was nobody's folk hero. Okay. And a lot of these other players had a history of, from domestic abuse to drugs to alcohol. There's no shortage of stories you can write about these dubious choices of character, but their numbers usually backed it up. And I want my Hall of Famer that I see representing the sport to be someone who's a balance between having really achieved something individually and for his team, as well as having the kind of character that when you think about him, it passes that moment that you probably reckoned when you found out that Bill Cosby was not the guy you thought he was. You were like, damn, I wanted him to be one of the good guys. I grew up with him. Same thing with the Palmeiro. I wanted him to be someone that could be respected the way you
So
respect,
here,
anyone who's a cheater.
And then on the other hand, on the other side of it, I just need to get this one off my chest, and Toronto fans will appreciate this. What I find absolutely criminal about the Hall of Fame, John Olerud is not in there. I'm going to be real. It has irked me for a long time. He had a 17-year career, basically two Gold Gloves, a 995 fielding percentage, career 295 hitter, and a 398 on base percentage over 17 years, and 2 World Series, and he never got in.
Well, and he also survived a brain aneurysm. So as far as I'm concerned, he belongs in the Human Hall of Fame for having a successful baseball career. But I gotta go to war with you on this one, Scott. I love Johnny O, and I think that he's a really excellent baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, he suffered from playing in an era where being a first baseman without speed and extraordinary power, it's kind of hard to make the case. I'm with you. If you look at his numbers, he was productive. He got on base. He didn't strike out a lot, and he was just a really solid two-way player offensively and defensively. But unfortunately, I just don't think he had enough. I think maybe another 2 or 3 years, and you could have made the numbers case. I just don't think the numbers.
A 17-year career, that's a heck of a long time.
It is, but he had maybe a grand total of about 6 or 7 really, really strong years, and I think the rest were just kind of like above average numbers, but kind of like, if you remember, he was just like one of those really steady Willie Upshot types where you knew if you plugged him in the lineup, you'd get above average performance.
I'm looking at his stats here. This bothers me a little bit. When he was with the Mets after he left Toronto, he batted 315 over 3 years, averaged a little over 20 home runs, and just shy of 100 RBIs. In the 5 years in his hometown of Seattle, he batted 285 and also basically had about 14 home runs on average and 80 RBIs on a year. And by that point, he was at the end of his career.
Great numbers, but you know what it sounds like to me in the hockey equivalent? It sounds to me like you described a 30-goal scorer. And I'm not saying a 30-goal scorer for his career can't make the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's what Sundin did, I just realized. But generally speaking, that kind of production for that position, unfortunately, is what did him in. Because if you look at the other first basemen who played in his power band era between the mid 90s to the mid 2000s, you're just going to find too many. And let's face it, first basemen aren't sexy. Let's not kid ourselves. You have to be a monster first baseman to be looked at as a Hall of Fame caliber player. Which is why if he were an outfielder, it would have probably been a different story too, right? That's also a tough position to make the Hall of Fame with. So I'm with you on that. Like, I think he came close to it, but I think maybe a couple more years would have put him over the top. Because I, 20 and 80 just doesn't seem like, the kind of numbers that really
so
power.
I'll give you an example of someone that I've been fighting with the Veterans Committee now, and I fought with the media before.
Oh, Ed, man, you're
On this
battling. I
player,
love it. What are you battling? Let's hear this.
Dave Concepcion.
That's a tough one.
Concepcion was
the big red
Ozzie
machine.
Smith. There wouldn't be an Ozzie Smith without Concepcion revolutionizing the game when he did.
And you know what? He was just such a team player, and he was part of that incredible big red machine. And I agree with you on that. I think that even though his numbers, because he was recognized as the defensive, wizard, and you're right, without Concepcion, there was no Ozzie Smith. I could see that. I could see the Veterans Committee bringing him in, and I think I'd be fine with that. I'd certainly be a hell of a lot better with that than Harold Bloody Baines. I mean, what are you talking about here?
I'll tell you what some of the people in the Veterans Committee have told me. He left the game and he forgot about baseball.
Concepcion.
And I said, hold on. He didn't forget about baseball, because if you see what he has done in his home country for the game, he has stayed in the game, not in North America, because he lives in a ranch in Venezuela. So don't say things that you are not familiar with if you don't walk in the man's shoes. He has worked to try to strive that country and revolutionize that country, and that's why we have a Soho. That's why we have Ozzie Smith. Guillen also. That's why he has helped all these future stars, and now Vizquel won't get into the hall because of what happens in his personal life. I don't understand. Are we playing what happens outside first, or are we playing on what has he done for the game?
I think a lot of it's a popularity contest. Who's the pop? I mean, you look at the All-Star game every year. Who's always a lock-in, even with their numbers not necessarily there. It's the popular players, the players that end up on SportsCenter, end up doing Pepsi commercials. And you see things like that. What's that?
Yeah, but if we go with what you are saying right now, then I have a bigger name in the shortstop position, and that's Tony Cabeza Fernandez. Fernandez was in the highlight reels of every sports center or every major network because of the agility that he had. Numbers, he didn't hit 300. He hit 298. But his numbers and his personality and what he did for the Toronto Blue Jays is a legacy. He should be in the hall.
I can't even begin to really disagree. I agree with you. I think if you're going to start making allowances for everything from the character of the individual to the kind of ambassador of baseball that they were, and that's important too, right? Because if you think about it, Harold Baines was, even though it seemed nothing more than cronyism and a political appointment and a favor for somebody really influential and wealthy, he was very important to the game because he was a mainstay of that era too. Tony took it to a whole different level because Tony, in the case of, you know how I feel about him, and for your listeners and viewers who don't, Tony Fernandez was a personal hero right from the start. I don't have a passion for baseball unless I learn about Tony Fernandez. I still remember, those classic catch and run throws of his where he, as a kid, you just mimicked it in the schoolyard, with your buddies, and you try to turn a double play and everybody's having fun. And that's what he did. He inspired people. And I agree with you. If you look at his numbers and if you look at the totality of his career and the fact also that he got better at the end of his career, that he had some monster seasons in all the, we'll call it, data analytics that we talked about, Scott. Tony put himself in a position where he was a very, very special baseball player. And sadly, his legacy, the legacy is the fans' legacy, Ed. Let's not mince words here. The organization has failed miserably miserably, in my opinion, to acknowledge what Tony did, starting with the fact that he was a woefully underpaid player. Go look at the numbers. Go look at how much he earned relative to how many wins above replacement he provided. So use the new data analytics. Then go back and use the old one, the classic eyes and ears and smell test, which is four times he came back to the same team to help them win World Series on one occasion. And in the end, I always felt that he didn't get the respect he deserved. Not on a scale of the ardor and love that the fans held for him. Because man, oh man, I mean, if you're again part of my generation, I keep referring you to it. I'm beginning to feel like a really old man of baseball.
Hey, I'm 45. I feel you, man.
Well, listen, then you understand what I'm talking about. That cluster of Blue Jays, and I apply the same kind of childish joy for the George Bells of the world, Jesse Barfield, Lloyd Moseby. First of all, you literally had the best outfield in baseball for a very significant window. It's not like those three just appeared, right? And that baseball was saying, they're great. No, at one point they were regarded by many people, especially from the American perspective, is that they were the best outfield in baseball, because it wasn't just about productivity. It was about what role each man played to help his team. And so you had the right field archetype, which was your defensive position, and the guy who, by the way, has the best arm in baseball and can hit 40 home runs. And then at center, you've got another defensive stalwart with wheels, because you need speed at the center field position. And of course, H.E.R, by the way, never gets enough credit for his power. I mean, I think I'm not sure if he had a 30-30 year, but he came pretty close when 30-30.
He had 29 and 30 in 85.
There you go. And that
the year that Bell won the MVP.
That's elite, man. Let's not hold back on that. At that stage in baseball, to be getting almost 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases, I mean, when Canseco did it, it was a big deal. Lloyd almost did it first. And then you've got in left field, which defensively we don't have to talk about. It's okay. It was always an adventure. God bless him. But you had the mighty Bell, George Bell, and his absolutely colossal, epic MVP year, which is especially made impressive because I think he went 0 for his last 35, and during that 87 collapse, which makes me wonder, man, what an extra home run would have done for not only the rest of his season, but for the Blue Jays season. But Fernandez, with all those guys, and I'm leaving out other classic names like Dave Stieb and Jimmy Key and other Blue Jays that were near and dear to me, Tom Henke. Tony Fernandez was to me the crown jewel. Everything that Blue Jays team is known for revolves around the grace, the elegance, the talent of Tony Fernandez. And you ask anyone who played with him, and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll probably say, don't even try to compare me to that guy. That's like literally comparing me to baseball's creme de la creme. You just don't want to do it.
I think personally, if they put up the numbers that they did, no knock to Toronto in, like, say, a New York area, an Atlanta area, LA, places that frankly have a larger population and a much stronger media influence, then yes, I do believe they get in there. But to basically, as somebody here in the tri-state area, I'm in suburban New Jersey here, right outside of New York, Canada really doesn't exist here. It's that place up north. We've heard about it. It's where everybody plays hockey and puts like maple syrup on everything. But down here, we are so enveloped in our own world. And I think that it also applies to the Hall of Fame as well, where we're more inclined to focus. Again, this is why I talk about popularity contests. These guys flew under the radar despite being enormously talented. You mentioned Tony Fernandez. You mentioned Dave Stieb, Jimmy Key. I mentioned John Olerud. Obviously, we're in the same boat here. But for a lot of the people that are bringing them in, this is a foreign country. And these are players that really don't get on the radar as much as somebody who would have played in a larger market down here.
That's true. That's very true. And Tony suffered from that enormously, by the way, because first of all, he had Ozzie Smith in the other league that he was often compared to.
And St. Louis is pretty big.
And not only that, it's the Cardinals. I get that part, but come on, let's not compare Ozzie Smith at the plate to Tony Fernandez.
But Ozzie Smith did handsprings and backflips.
He did. And defensively, he won a gazillion Gold Gloves. I get it. But Tony could do both. And that's why I think if anybody really remembered what he did, they'd understand why he was Hall of Fame caliber. Look, you can blame Cecilio Aguante, and I forgot who the other fellow was that also hit him. Remember, he got the shot on the eye, and then, of course, Bill Madlock took him out in 87, I think it was during the stretch run, that, I hate to say it, gentlemen, those two injuries don't happen, Tony Fernandez is in the Hall of Fame, because Tony Fernandez probably plays an extra 2 or 3 years. And considering he always improved his craft and got better, I mean, man, I just realized, Ed, you know, you could probably start another network channel just dedicated to Tony, and I'd be more than happy to provide content, because I just realized how much there really is to say and talk about this gem of a baseball player. And here we are lamenting that these cheaters didn't get in, or trying to rationalize or justify these cheaters getting in, when in reality we have priceless, beautiful players that we can turn to, like a Tony Fernandez, put him in the Hall of Fame, create a true example for children everywhere, make them appreciate baseball for what it means.
I'll give you the true classic of this. The gentleman that is going into that went into the Hall of Fame 2 years ago, Mr. Jeter, was the replacement for Tony Fernandez.
When he was with the Yankees, yeah.
Tony was the Yankees
short. So that should tell you sufficiently why he should be in the Hall. He was replaced by the man that they call one of the best Yankees ever. So if he's one of the best Yankees ever, and he replaced Tony Fernandez, Tony should be there beside him.
Scott said it best. It's so much about being a popularity contest as well. And one of the advantages about the passage of time is you get voters who are a little bit more savvy to those players that we are talking about, that we respect. My fear, though, is that there'll be a lot of cop-outs, and they'll go and let these, quote, cheaters in, which, again, how do you not let a talent of Roger Clemens' caliber, or a statistical monster achievement that Barry Bonds did in rewriting the books? However, they're bloody cheaters. They are admitted, in some cases, intimated, in some cases in denial. If we accept that they cheated, we let them in the Hall of Fame.
I will fight you in that one. I will fight you in that one with one simple thing. You still need skill and understanding of the game to be able to hit a ball at 100 miles per hour.
That's true.
And nobody can tell me that there is any drug in this world that makes a baseball look like a basketball.
But isn't that the saddest part of this story, is that we're talking about names that would have made the Hall of Fame in spite of their decision to augment. I mean, let's face it, this was an ego play. This was Barry looking at what Mark and Sammy were doing before him and saying, you know what? I want to own these records. I will do anything I can to own these records. I will inflate my head to 30% its normal size
and cheat,
and change my body type so I can cheat and become the best player. Not just the best player in terms of hitting a home run, but my God, what was that year where they walked him intentionally 21 times with runners on base, thereby conceding a run rather than face him? Like, I'm sorry, that's when you become God of baseball. And if you're the God of baseball, and the way that you became the God is because you weren't happy being a small little Titan, then at that point you have to start asking yourself, to your point, Ed, and Scott, I'm going to let you get in here because you want to make a point on this. If you're going to measure it based on character, the decision is clear. But if character doesn't matter to you and you're going to look at the fact that they were talented anyways, then for sure they should be in the Hall. I think it's a bloody shame, though. Otherwise, why is it called the Hall of Fame? It should be called the Hall of Notoriety. It should be the Hall of Popularity, not the Hall of Fame. Because to me, the word fame does not make me think of cheaters. It makes me think of people who deserve that fame. You know, in the Oprah, you know, Princess Di mold, they were famous. They had great fame, but who knows? Maybe that's what fame is.
So here's what I will say in this case here. And this is, I think this is where I'm going to side with Ari on this one. Don't forget who is in the Hall of Fame. Bud Selig. Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, despite the fact that he was over the top of all of this stuff. Now, you can say that he knew nothing about it. Fine. But how does a leader of anything not take responsibility for the failures that are happening beneath him? In this particular case, and also to add to that point, when there was a suspension finally in place for steroid use, that suspension was a 10-game suspension initially. Not 50, not 100, not a season. 10 games. 1/16 of the season for knowingly using steroids and getting busted for it. He is in the Hall of Fame, but like your point, the players are not. And I think a lot of it is because in Bud Selig getting in, I think was highly contested on that. And a lot of people were like, he orchestrated, he saw all this kind of stuff. He turned a blind eye. And I'll be real, I think he did. I think there was so much money involved. That 98, that 98 home run chase, that was on national TV. You never saw a Tuesday night game, broadcast by Joe Buck and I think Tim McCarver at the time, just because of the fact you got a last place team that has a chance of doing something special. That never happened. But suddenly it did. You have home runs, you have the new era that you have now, the Sports Center era of the long ball. When you have Brady Anderson hitting 50 home runs in a year, of all these people that are doing it, he saw it at the top. If he's in the Hall of Fame now, despite all that, and despite the strike of 94 and the issue of 2002 with the All-Star game, why can't the players be in?
That was the distant early warning, by the way, with regards to what baseball, the reckoning that was on baseball's horizon in the late 80s was, a leadoff hitter for the Baltimore Orioles hitting 54 home runs when his previous career high was 22 or 27.
20, yeah.
So already you knew something was coming. But, and it's easy to be conspiratorial. It's the same people who come to me and say, Ari, how does a 29-year-old journeyman middling infielder who can barely hit 20 home runs become a baseball legend in Toronto and lead the league in home runs back-to-back years? And I've got to say, well, Jose Bautista made it because he took his vitamins, worked hard, and got there. Even though today the average cynic will look at that and say, no, that doesn't make sense. There must have been something more to it.
I did.
Well, and to me, it's honestly irrelevant at this point because the truth is that, Scott, as you said, we're talking about an era where a lot gets forgotten very quickly. And when you put a commissioner and you enshrine him in your Hall of Fame, who allowed a lot of this to happen under his watch and could have affected the outcome differently, then you shouldn't be surprised when these players that were part of his era eventually make the Hall of Fame as well. Bud Selig's legacy, in my opinion, was that baseball made a lot of money under his watch, like you said, but he also damaged the game irreversibly and created now a subsequent era for Rob Manfred to soil by dropping his standards even lower.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's just call it what it is. AJ Hinch and Alex Cora are employed again. It's been 2 years since the world outside of baseball discovered
the old employer that fired him.
the sport's broken. There was cheating. They invalidated all their stats. What are we talking about here? They had the mendacity to look us in the eye and say, even though we broke our sport temporarily and awarded a team that shouldn't have won it because they cheated, let's just forget about it, get through COVID, give you some more baseball, and you'll just keep paying and eating your, Cracker Jacks and peanuts. And I've eaten enough of that bullshit from that commissioner's office. And as much as it would be easy to isolate Rob Manfred, it's because Bud Selig established that culture of forgiveness where, I guess if you look into a camera and just say, I'm sorry, and cry a little bit, you can move on. And in America, that's how it works, by the way, whether you're a politician, a celebrity, or a sports player. All you've got to do is say, I'm sorry.
I deeply regret my actions.
And exactly. But you know what that was? That was a little church sin humility. And even though it may not have seemed completely authentic, it's on record now. And that's what people use to forgive and move on. Unfortunately, players like Rafael Palmeiro and Sammy Sosa hurt themselves enormously by not showing any of that humility. Because let's face it, we know in the case of Sammy could have been a player that had he not taken performance-enhancing drugs, could probably have still made the Hall of Fame. Why? Because he was a 30-30 player at the age of 21. He had the stuff. He had the secret sauce that baseball offers players at that age, but it wasn't enough. He needed to take it to a level where he could start hitting 60 home runs. Again, it was Sammy Sosa, guys. You look at a picture of him when he was 22 years old, you compare it to him at 34, there was something unnatural going on. You know who never looked different was Frank Thomas. Mm-hmm. Frank Thomas was a big boy when he burst into the league and changed baseball down in Chicago for about 10 to 12 years of his power band years. Just unbelievable numbers, just a true masher. But not just
Jim Thome.
Yeah, same thing with Thome. Although Thome would strike out a lot more. That's what I loved about Frank Thomas. Every at bat was like, that's it. This is the moment where the game could be decided. And he usually decided for you over the left field fence. So I look at players like that and I say, cool, character, consistency and everything. What I don't like are the players who started, faltered a little bit. And even, I hate to say this, guys, even Roger Clemens did the same thing. Even though he started off in the first 5-6 years as the best up and coming pitcher in baseball, he struggled, got traded to the Toronto Blue Jays, and then magically won the pitching triple crown. Not once, but in back-to-back years after it had never been done before, or at least not been done since the era of, Sandy Koufax. Like, what? Suddenly Roger Clemens is a triple crown winner back-to-back? And then, of course, he leaves, goes to the Yanks, wins his World Series, and names his children with the letter K, and life is happy for him, at least happy in the sense that he got through it. Now we know he was part of that era, of players that ruined the game for us. And it's a tough one because I get asked every day. At some point, I feel like somebody asked me, should Roger Clemens be in the Hall of Fame? I'm like, yes and no. Yes, he should be. But no, if you let him in, then stop talking about character.
If you let him one, you suddenly got to let them all in. And I think that's where they're trying to decide what to do. Because once you let one in, the floodgates just open. Because now McGuire can go in, Bonds can go in. You have
agreed. Is Rafael Palmeiro less deserving than Roger Clemens to be in the Hall of Fame? Hell no. No, if you balance the scales and say character is not a factor, and we need to let these players in because they overachieved, even though we know that they played fast and loose with the rules, then let them all in, and let's stop wasting our time and all this hot air trying to debate whether they should be in there. But Ed, I agree with you. It's a terrible shame that we've lost sight of what's important. And now you throw in the political side with Harold Baines getting in, and then it just becomes laughable. Now it's like anything goes. Nothing would surprise me anymore in terms of who goes to the Hall of Fame.
I don't know if you guys
I think hockey preserves it better. Hockey seems to preserve it a little bit better. Now it seems to be the only league I actually pay attention to when they let in players because they usually get it right.
If you guys want to really laugh, look at the list of the next 5 years of classes for the whole. You have a dilemma. Who the hell do you let in, and how the rest of the people on the ballot are going to pan out? Because I don't think anybody is, for the next 3 classes at least, you have possibly some of the top players in the game of the modern era that will shadow everyone out.
No, there's no question about it.
Well, Ortiz, I'm looking at the 2022 one. Ortiz will be able to get in.
And again, there's a player that also has a murky past when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs. Maybe some would argue not nearly as obvious as maybe those players who had poor years and suddenly burst on the scene, but there was always that odor, and it's a shame because Ortiz was a real great team player and everybody loved being around him, and that smile of his, he was a great marketing, ambassador for baseball.
You have Ramirez as well in that list. I mean, who's trying to make a comeback at 47, which I was trying to figure that one out.
I agree. No humility, though. That player has no humility, sadly.
I spoke with him about 2 weeks ago when he put his foot in Japan, and I said, what exactly is it you're trying to do? You are trying to show Major League Baseball to see if you can come back?
Hey, listen, Julio did
as the bad boy?
57, I think, right? Julio Franco's last professional year in baseball, I think he was 57 years old. So
yeah, but Julio Franco was Julio Franco. Statue.
Sometimes you get a guy who just basically wants to see what they can do with himself. I mean, heck, we saw it in boxing recently with Tyson Jones. Here's 2 guys in their mid-50s, and you know what? To their credit, they were in pretty solid shape for guys in their mid-50s. Sometimes I think you just get the itch in your system, and you're just like, let me see if I can at least hold a candle to what I used to be.
Well, in July of next year, you'll be able to see if we will have a return of Jose Bautista to Major League when he pitches for his country in the country's national team in the Olympics.
That's what it comes down to, doesn't it? At the end, that's what it all comes down to. Jose Bautista pitching now. Like, if there were any more reasons to think that the world could be more surreal with the coronavirus and with all these changes in baseball, now Jose Bautista's arrived. What's his out pitch, by the way? Ed, I haven't been following that. What's his go-to pitch? What has he got?
So he has a fastball that was clocked at 92, and a slider at 88.
Man, I would love to see him succeed. I think it would be an absolute blast for the fans.
And
Their
and I
minds.
and I'll tell you, Ari, one thing. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see him in a Blue Jays uniform for the last year before his retirement.
Ed, I think that it's Christmas time upon us here, and you can make a wish, and maybe it'll come true. Maybe Mark Shapiro and company will make that come true. Man, Jose, what an era! But let's go back to the theme of the show, which is humility. If he had shown a little bit more humility as a Toronto Blue Jays player, I think it could have cast his career very differently than the way it's been perceived. Because I don't know if you guys have noticed lately, but the ratio of Jose Bautista admirers to haters is about 1-to-1 in the city. There are just as many people who adore this guy as there are who don't. And you're probably thinking, well, why is that? Because he was such a successful Blue Jay. Well, that's why. First of all, he was really successful. And you know what happens when you're very good at something? You're going to have haters, especially if you're not a traditional, Prairie Province, white-skinned baseball player. He came in here as somebody with a fiery temperament. He came in with a real swagger. And he was ignored in the beginning by baseball and picked up as a reclamation project, and then burst, forward into like this supernova of success for about 3 to 4 years. But I hate to say it, I think it went to his head too quickly. I think there were way too many sound bites during his Blue Jays career where he just sounds like he's this impudent, management didn't get this player at the break. I'm not thrilled. Even when the Blue Jays finally got back to the playoffs and made those trades to get Price and Tulowitzki. I remember when he found out Jose did that, his buddy Jose Reyes, who we can probably go on record as saying the most probably underperformed Blue Jays in history for expectations, right? I mean, this guy really was a bust for what he could have been. And when they traded him, he was like nonplussed about Tulowitzki coming. Everybody else was excited. Jose was like, that's good. I don't know why we needed a new shortstop. And then of course you could see every year after that, after those back-to-back home run years, those big home run years, you got this impression that there was always a chip on his shoulder. And I wish he would have shown, I guess maybe you can't show humility when you've gone through life the way Jose Bautista has, but I think it hurt his cred. I think it hurt the perception he gave Toronto fans of being more, say, like a Carlos Delgado. Although there's another guy that should have gotten way more credit. And you want to talk about Hall of Fame, Ed. 3.4% on the first ballot for a guy with over 450 home runs and 1,500 RBIs. What kind of jackass garbage is that? Do you want to talk about popularity contest? He was unpopular because he said some things that rubbed the wrong people in America about Puerto Rico, as he rightfully should have, because, Puerto Rico's never gotten the treatment that it deserves from its own so-called State of the Union.
So just wanted to bring you a little note with regards to Jose. Because you will love this one. He is 4-0 for Licey.
Bring it on. Oh, man. Make me eat my words,
1.37 ERA.
Holy moly. Well, listen, if that's what it'll take during a pandemic and Christmas to get us over the hump into 2021, I say bring it on. I say we need to get Atkins on the phone right now, secure, a few starts with Jose. Listen, when Dave,
we have a problem with.
Remember when Dave have a problem
with the Blue Jays? Where are we going to play? Because they cannot play in Buffalo now.
I think John Tory should build them some kind of special stadium. No, I don't know where they're going to play. That's a great question too, and that's
Buffalo. They cannot play in Buffalo because the Bisons are playing there.
Mm-hmm.
What an identity complex for Toronto sports. You've got the Raptors in Tampa.
They are thinking of Florida, and Montoyo told them, I won't go to manage there. So.
I'm going to throw a left field thought out there. And this actually would go over really well. Richmond, Virginia. Because the Richmond Braves, if they don't have minor league baseball again, the Richmond Braves is a AAA stadium that I think would be able to house the Blue Jays. And in this case, it's kind of pretty much equidistant between the East Coast side of it, Florida and up north. And that actually might not be the worst idea out there. It's right dead in the middle. It's a warm weather climate. I think I want to throw Richmond into it. Why not?
Awesome. So with that, guys, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are a little over time, but it was a great conversation. Ari, we would love to have you back.
I'll be back, Ed and Scott. Real pleasure meeting you and speaking with you.
Likewise,
By the
sir.
way.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. We will do this again for sure, especially if Jose Bautista is going to be pitching and getting notoriety. We gotta
So,
Ari, if
just
it's
to,
cool, I'll drop you an email.
so Ari, just to give you an idea how popular Scott is, he's going to be the sound and the face of the New Jersey Devils.
Yeah.
Promoting them.
Congratulations, that's brilliant.
Right. Yeah, I got MSG Networks contacted me.
Right.
About 3 years back, I did a few commercials for the New Jersey Devils that played in the tri-state area and at Prudential Center and everything like that.
Beautiful.
Last week, they contacted me again. In this case, I didn't go to MSG because of social distancing. So my wife and I ended up recording it here, doing all the scripts, doing all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they're going to be running it on MSG Network starting next month.
Scott, I love your style. Good resiliency, man. You deserve that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Much good success with that.
What's that?
Good stuff. Continued success with that, because that's the kind of stuff that's going to get you through a pandemic. Being resourceful, collaborating with people. You don't have to, obviously.
There's a quote by Charles Swindoll that says, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you deal with it. I have lived that one big time in 2012.
That's a perfect way to end the show, Ed. You got it all wrapped up now. You got to be pleased.
100%. So
your kick-ass background that I can't get enough of. I feel like a dragon's gonna fly in or something. Something's happening here, gentlemen. Real pleasure doing this. Let's do this again soon.
Definitely.
You let me know, Ed, when you want to do it. Whatever you want to do, whatever kind of round table format. Like I said, right now the big thing for me is promoting my podcast. And in the new year, I'll probably be doing a lot of extensive other styles of podcasting as well. So, keeping busy. This is catharsis for all of us, gentlemen. Let's face it, through really difficult times. And it was a pleasure sharing this time with you tonight.
Perfect. So, Ari, please let everybody know in our beautiful world of ZINGOTV and ZINGO Network how they can reach you in social media and where they can follow you.
Well, you can check out my website for all the podcasting and publishing that I do on a regular basis at reshapiro.ca. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the Whiskey and Cream podcast. That's Whiskey and Cream, which you can find on Spotify and iTunes, and also directly available through my website. We've got everything from politics, sports, philosophy, films, music, you name it. Anything to take your mind off the moment and find some true and genuine catharsis.
Thank you very much. And Scott, we know that we can see you here on the Barnburner Network twice on Tuesday, both for the Sports Den and for Tales from the Film Set. But your social media platforms, please.
Yeah, like I said, I'm the only Scott Schertzen in the country. Last name CHURCHSON. So you Google me, you'll Google that name, you're going to find me. It's actually really easy. But yeah, Twitter's under the same, Instagram, Facebook. My website, if you want to download or view any of the stuff that I have, any of the reels, the press kit, all that kind of stuff, get in contact with me. Any way is workable. I'll get back to you.
So this show can also be heard on the Barnburner Radio Network and its 122 platforms on social media. Remember to go to our website, barnburner.ca, for all the news, whether it is sports or entertainment or otherwise. And remember that Barnburner, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, but especially live it, because Barnburner is sport and sports is Barnburner. Please stay safe in this holiday season. Stay home, stay away from the pandemic.